In a country as diverse as America, you would think it impossible to find a characteristic that two-thirds of us have in common. Yet researchers estimate that 66.3% of adult Americans are overweight or obese. And among children, the number is nearly 1 in 3. Now, once thought to be primarily a concern for the self-esteem and mental health of the individual carrying those extra pounds, there is increased attention now being paid to the negative physiological effects stemming from obesity and to the cost society incurs when so many of us struggle to maintain a healthy weight. Now, the New England Journal of Medicine has estimated that obesity causes over 100,000 excess deaths in the United States each and every year. And obesity is associated with numerous chronic and catastrophic diseases and is a leading cause of disability, healthcare utilization, and also healthcare costs. Now tonight we're going to look at the dynamics of the obesity epidemic. Why have we gotten so much bigger? What are the true costs of an increasingly obese society? And what can be done in this community specifically to reverse these trends? All this and more tonight on VoiceBox. Well, good evening. Welcome. We've got a great panel tonight to really talk about an issue that has really reached all levels of public policy concern in the United States, a principal initiative of the First Lady in the White House. We have joining us from the George Washington University Weight Management Center, Dr. Scott Kahan, who's also on the faculty of Johns Hopkins University in their Department of Public Health. Scott, welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Amy McCloskey, who is the Food Services Director with Arlington County Public Schools. Amy, welcome.
Thank you.
And also from Arlington Public Schools we have, now stay tuned for this title, the Supervisor of Health, Physical, Drivers Education, and Athletics, we have Debbie DeFranco. Welcome all of you. This is certainly a serious topic and one that, sort of, I think we've all been conditioned to thinking about mostly from the standpoint of the person who is obese, but there's been a lot of attention paid to the societal costs. We recently had this incredible healthcare debate in this country, which on one level was about getting coverage to the uninsured, but it was also about controlling healthcare costs. And estimates say that 9% of our country's healthcare costs are related to obesity. And with Medicare and Medicaid, half of those costs are really borne by all of us as taxpayers. So that seems to say to me that obesity is something that we should all be concerned about. Scott, do you agree?
Completely.
Now, what's changed, or has anything changed, or has our understanding of obesity as a societal problem just come into greater focus?
Well, absolutely. So we used to think about obesity as an individual problem, and we tended to blame it on willpower. People just don't work hard enough at making the right choices in terms of eating and in terms of exercising. And we know now that that's really nonsense. Certainly, we all make decisions for ourselves, but our decisions are couched within so many things in our society. They're couched within the policies that govern our society. They're couched within the organizations that we work at and that we go to school at. They're couched within the families that we've grown up in and so forth. And so this really is an environmental and a societal problem that results in an individual obesity problem and weight gain problem. So part of the issue is that we need to keep working with people for them to learn more about nutrition and exercise and have the wherewithal to do that. But we absolutely need to look at the environment, our society, our cities, our communities, our schools, and so forth, in order to help people make those right decisions for themselves.
Now I remember in preparation for this show, I was thinking back to my childhood, and I don't know if you all remember, but there was a commercial, an advertisement for, I believe it was Special K cereal. And they were advising Americans that if they could pinch more than an inch, they maybe needed to think about weight control. That seems almost quaint compared to the obesity issues that we confront today. And Amy, let me ask you about food and the role food plays in all of this. Arlington has made some changes in the food choices that we offer through our lunch program over the years to, I guess, deal with this issue in some way. What's going on with the relation of what we're taking in leading to this problem?
Exactly. We've made a lot of changes, not only to address obesity, just to address healthy eating in general. We have gotten rid of all of our deep fat fryers in the schools. We only use baked products. We've gotten rid of whole milk. We've gotten rid of high sugar and high fat snacks. We're changing to offer more dark green vegetables, orange vegetables. We're doing an education component on our menu so kids understand why they're making healthier choices. And we'll keep moving in that direction so that, in a few years we're meeting all the guidelines for the Healthier Schools Challenge.
Now, let me just ask you, how are the students responding to that? I mean, getting rid of the deep fat fryer, that means no deep fat fried French fries, which I know has long been a staple of the school menu. How are the students responding to that?
Well, it's been a gradual. It used to be 2 years ago, 3 years ago, before I started, that we had French fries every day. And we cut down to 3 times a week and then twice a week, and now 2 or 3 times a month we use baked fries.
Okay.
And we anticipated that kids would be unhappy and there would be a lot of complaining, but actually there wasn't. And one of the reasons why we made the gradual change is because we worked really hard to find other products that kids would like, that were healthy, that they were a part of choosing, that they could purchase in addition to their lunch. So it's been going remarkably well.
Well, Debbie, I want to talk about sort of the other component. I mean, obesity, it's a huge problem, but, really defining it and understanding why we have that problem is rather simple, right, Scott? I mean, obesity is when you have too much fat tissue, and it comes because you take in too many calories and you don't metabolize enough of them off, right? So what about the exercise portion of it? Are we approaching the way we educate people about exercise and physical education differently as a response to our growing obesity problem?
We're trying to make those changes in the schools and trying to teach our children as well as families to make healthy decisions about their behaviors, their habits. CDC just released a survey recently about the amount of screen time our children have, which is almost 2+ hours a day. And if that's what our children are doing, then that's a sure component or criteria that there's going to have some weight issues and some obesity will play into the factor of those children who have that screen time. So we're encouraging our children to move. We're trying to have in our educational program activities that they can do in and out of school, dual and individual fitness activities that they don't have to have the traditional team sport. Arlington does offer through their Parks and Rec programs as well as the schools those interscholastic team programs so that kids can learn that sportsmanship component, but in our high school programs we're actually offering more lifetime activities, which they may not do in their late teens or early 20s, but it's something that they'll fall back on that maybe later on in life as they go through their lifetime. We're educating them on those activities that they can do in their 60s, 70s, and 80s to keep them active without putting a strain on them or needing 20 of their closest friends to have a pickup game of basketball or whatever those team sports that we were pretty much raised on.
Yeah.
So we're looking to kind of give them the education for a lifetime.
We are just starting this conversation on obesity on VoiceBox tonight. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, you can send us an email, voicebox@arlingtonmedia.org. We'll also move very soon to questions from our live studio audience. But before we do that, I want to get back to sort of the real health manifestations of obesity, Scott. I lost the ability to fully absorb all of the diseases and all of the health concerns that really obesity is a leading indicator of. I mean, give us a sense of really how pervasive this is and the health outcomes that people are experiencing.
Yeah, obesity is a strong risk factor for a number of medical problems. Heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. I believe there's 12 cancers that are directly related to obesity. Certainly things like arthritis of the knees and the hips, the weight-bearing joints, lung problems, and so forth. So you can go on and on and on. Many, many, many health problems. What's perhaps even more scary than that is that the same thing happens in kids. So as kids live years and decades with being overweight and with the behaviors that lead to that, they're developing adult onset diabetes in their teens and sometimes even earlier. And we are even seeing things like hypertension and even heart disease in kids in adolescence and slowly even younger and younger than that. So it's really progressing in a pretty scary way.
It's amazing. So, I mean, clearly for many Americans who may be overweight, people watching, a natural question they may have is, well, how do I do it? How do I get to the point where I'm actually losing the weight to reach a healthy weight? It's not so easy. You just can't take a pill, even though there's a huge diet pill industry. It doesn't seem that that makes it happen. So, let's go back to food a little bit. Just in my lifetime, the whole concept of supersized meals at fast food joints and portion sizes at restaurants, these all have become so much larger. It doesn't seem that that's kept pace with our nutritional needs. What do you think about that, Amy, our reliance on such huge portions in this country?
It's funny that you say that because for the school lunch program, we use half-cup portions, which is the recommended portion size. And that is one big complaint that we hear from teachers and students alike. It's not enough. It looks so small, and it actually is enough. And that, that's funny that it's just one of those things. Even with the vegetables, it's just a half a cup, and that's one serving. So eating 5 vegetables and fruits a day, a lot of kids don't know that, can happen pretty easily.
So I guess compared to what they're seeing outside of
Exactly.
schools, these portions do look rather tiny.
The same with a small carton of milk. 8 ounces
Right.
is very small compared to a supersized big gulp.
Right.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
yeah.
if I may, just piggyback
Absolutely.
on what Amy's doing. In our health education, we're trying to help kids learn more about nutrition and really what portion sizes are. And if you say to them, an average portion size for meat is 4 ounces, they have no concept of what 4 ounces looks like. So we try to give them in our health education classes, it looks like a deck of cards. It looks like the size of a baseball. So we try to give them real visuals so that they know what portion sizes look like in a kid's vocabulary and what their real world activities and their experiences are, because the media, the restaurants, the supersizing has really blown portion size out of control where kids don't know what a serving size is. So we're really stressing that a lot in our health education, and we have kids draw on paper plates of what portion sizes are and take them home, because even their parents need that education. As parents and adults, we've lost what a portion size looks like. So we've done that as young as even elementary and into the middle school years, so that they recognize truly what a portion size is.
Yeah, how did this come to be? I mean, it seems like it would be in the very best interests of food service establishments to keep portions the same and raise prices over time. Why in the world are they increasing portions so much that are leading to all these other issues? I don't know if any of you have an answer, or just speculate on, why in the world are we supersizing everything?
It's a basic economic thing. So over time, in general, the unhealthier foods have gotten cheaper. Sugar, fats, butters, things like that, they've gotten cheaper over time. Part of it is due to a counterintuitive policy on agricultural subsidies. Part of it has to do with the fact that we are able to mass produce them much better. So since they're so cheap, it's very easy to supersize with those things, because after all, when you get a supersized Big Mac and things like that, it's basically more sugar and fat that you're getting. You're not getting, there's no supersizes of vegetables and fruits, right? And so it's very easy and very cheap to make those unhealthy foods supersized. The people that are buying them get a value added. They get a lot more food, and that's nice, and it costs very much less. And the stores and the restaurants that are selling it, it costs very much less to sell it extra, but they're getting more and more and more in terms of volume sold. So they end up making more money. We eat more. That's a great thing in any other time at any other place, except for right now when obesity is such a big deal.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine in many ways this whole, it used to be, I suppose, in Victorian England and other places, having an abundance of food was somehow seen as a sign of prosperity, and those have positive connotations. Do we think we're there in society where we generally accept that it's not good, it's not a sign of progress and prosperity to carry excess weight? Do you think we're getting to that tipping point where people are wanting to be healthier?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, but I also think from a customer service and a business standpoint, if people feel that they're getting a good value, like a buy one, get one free, you get repeat customers, and it ends up being a good thing. I think that's something people have to weigh, especially with the economy or with our customers, because they're kids and they're careful with their money. They don't have a lot of money, so they are looking for a good value. So I'm not sure if we're there yet or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if we're not there yet, is there a role for other entities to play? Government. Now, Scott, you mentioned that in some way, government, by subsidizing certain agricultural products, high fructose corn syrup is often viewed as a culprit derived from corn, which is subsidized through federal farm policy, making it extremely cheap. Well, with that being the case, is there a role for government in maybe dealing with this obesity epidemic? Do you think that this is something that should be a part of federal, state, local policy?
Absolutely. Again, what I was saying at the beginning is that clearly this is an individual decision. What we eat, what we do, whether we sit on the couch or whether we go to the gym or go for a walk, it's up to us to decide that. But our decisions are couched within so much more. They're couched within the social and cultural norms that we grew up in. They're couched within the policies that govern what we do and how much things cost and what's available in schools and at work and so forth. And so when we talk from a public health perspective about changing behaviors, one of the things we need to do is work with individuals so that they have knowledge on what to do and that they have self-efficacy or the confidence to be able to do those things. But at the same time, we have to work with government policies, both local and state and national, and we have to work with workplaces and schools and so forth, and also among families and communities. We have to work at slowly changing those social norms, and that's how we're going to deal with this.
We're going to move to questions from our studio audience. Do we have anyone who'd like to pose a question tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, how are you guys? My name is Rashawn. I have a question about the soda tax. I was kind of wondering what you guys thought about it. Do you think it will be effective? And do you think it will affect the kids long term? Like, how do you think it will affect the kids long term?
Thanks, Rashawn. One of these kind of government policies, that folks are thinking about, whether or not to add a tax to sugary soft drinks. I think in D.C. they're talking about a penny per ounce, and other places they have similar kind of constructions, but as a way, theoretically, of negatively encouraging people to move away from sugary soft drinks. What do you think about that as sort of a policy tool?
I mean, I think that it goes back to the individual making those healthy choices. When you go into a grocery store, you have different choices. You can pick water, you can pick fruit juices, and then you can pick that high content of sugary soda or other beverages. I don't know that the economic factor is going to be really that much of a play. I think it has to be more of making those, healthy decisions. Until you really start hitting the pocketbook hard, I think people just are still going to gravitate toward what they prefer, and we just have to educate them more about those healthier decisions. It's similar to what we experienced in Arlington when we were switching out our vending machines, that it was going to be a great change at first. We knew that there would be an economic loss with some of the contents when we changed them over to healthier food choices, but eventually the kids came around, they're hungry, they just want to spend their money, and they will go to the healthier food choice. So money will play a factor, but I think it's more about making those healthy decisions and giving them the opportunity to make those decisions, because when they leave the school and they go out into the general public, they're still going to have to make those decisions. So I think of it more of that, is just teaching them those behaviors and giving them the education to make good decisions.
Price is an important determinant of health. There's many determinants, but it's one of them, okay? And so we have studies that show that a penny per ounce increase in tax on sodas would lead to about a 10% decrease in consumption of those sodas. And so that's a nice start in terms of working toward obesity. It's not going to solve the obesity epidemic, but it's one piece of a larger puzzle that we can do from an environmental level down to the individual level that would be helpful. Now, I think it's important to consider that sodas are artificially cheap. They've been artificially cheapened over the years, in part due to our, again, counterproductive agricultural policy. So if you look at the cost of sodas over the course of the last 2 or 3 decades, they've actually gotten cheaper compared to inflation, even as fruits and vegetables have gotten more expensive compared to inflation. That's backwards. For the unhealthiest and highest calorie foods to be cheaper than the healthy foods and to be getting even cheaper over time makes no sense. And it's one of the factors that leads to this problem that we have here. So I think that fixing that, whether in the form of a tax or whether in the form of getting rid of that artificial cheapness of the sodas absolutely has to be a piece of the puzzle. And not just sodas, but other unhealthy foods. And then we should take the money that comes in there and subsidize the healthy foods so that, like you say, children and adults have the opportunity to buy healthy foods that taste good at a cheaper price, and the norms head in that direction.
That's what I want to talk about for a little bit. You know, forgive me, I do economics for a living, so I'm fascinated by this whole, concept of, negative incentives through taxation, positive incentives through subsidy. But one of the clear pieces of evidence the research show is that these low nutritive value foods, these high calorie, high fat foods, are increasingly prevalent in lower income communities. Those are the only kinds of choices available to a lot of people, and that kind of corresponds with obesity rates among African Americans and other groups. And what is it about getting healthy foods into the hands of people at a fair enough price that makes it a rational choice for them to go ahead and choose to consume them? Because if you look at a lot of low-income people buying a bottle of fruit juice versus a bottle of soda, they're making a rational decision economically to buy the soda, right?
Yeah, everything is set up in our societies right now for weight gain, okay? In general, the unhealthiest and highest calorie foods are also the cheapest foods. And they're also the most heavily marketed foods, and they're the most available foods, particularly in inner cities. They're the highest portion foods. And so it makes perfect sense that those are the foods that we buy and we eat, and we tend to gain weight. So again, slowly changing that over time, the availability, the marketing, the price structures, the portion sizes, will help people help themselves.
Let's move to exercise for a moment, because I'm fascinated. There are so many more exercise opportunities available to people now than I remember 20 years ago. Gyms, especially in communities like this, every block, maybe multiple gyms on blocks, extensive bike trails, and you watch infomercials, it seems that exercise equipment is flying off the shelves. What's going on there? Why is there seems to be a disconnect with our becoming so unhealthy as a society, yet having the opportunities and availability for exercise and physical release so much more prevalent. Any thoughts, Debbie?
I think time is a factor. Getting to the gym is important. And then there are so many of those infomercials where you can buy those equipments in your house. And those are high-end, expensive items that require maintenance, and they may not fit with your home, your lifestyle. We in the schools try to teach our kids an economical fitness. Use the walking, use the bike trails, use free weights. You don't need these heavy weight systems and these fancy gyms. Nothing against them. It's fine when you go out and you can afford to do that. But we're trying to teach kids that fitness doesn't have to be expensive. And, we teach them to do simple exercises and stretching and activities. If they are going to watch TV, do it during the commercials. You've got 60 seconds right there. Do some sit-ups, do some push-ups. We know that kids have screen time, but we're also trying to get them to be active, like for those latchkey kids who come home and can't go outside and play in a neighborhood, that live in an apartment and they have to come home. There are things that you can do within your house that you don't need those high-end fitness activities. For the adults, I don't know, it's hard to speak to that because there are so many opportunities for them in our areas and our facilities, especially here in Arlington. The fitness centers, the swimming pools, state-of-the-art, beautiful facilities. It surprises me that they're not more widely used, just because they are so accessible, they're reasonable, and I think it's just a matter of time. When do we do this? We're working a lot. Some of our parents are working 2 jobs. They come home. The last thing they really want to do is run out to a gym and work out because they've got childcare issues or they've got things to do in the house to just keep up, their lifestyle. I think time is a big factor, and those infomercials and things try to make everything look just so easy, and it's really not. To get the true benefits, you've got to be doing 30 to 60 minutes a day to really find some cardiovascular. And it doesn't, and research now is showing, it doesn't have to be consecutive. You can break it up in little gaps, but time is still a factor for us.
Amy, tell us about sort of how lunch operates for students in Arlington schools, because you know, it also seems to me that while we're eating unhealthier things, we're also doing so by putting a lot of calories in a short amount of time, because you know, our lunch breaks have gotten shorter, our time to actually sit down and be with food has become more condensed as people have so many other things going on in their lives. Does that sort of play a role where you know, you're just scarfing down food and you need high calorie stuff to make you feel fulfilled?
It doesn't help, but we have addressed that in Arlington. We have a wellness policy, and we have recommended that kids get at least 10 minutes for breakfast before school, and at least 20 minutes to eat, not stand in line, not coming and going, but to eat their lunch.
Okay.
And studies do prove that if you take longer and you enjoy your meal and you finish eating. The other thing is we have recess at some schools before lunch. And that's nice because the kids can go out and run around and get the energy out and then come in and really sit down and pay attention to what they're eating. So I think that's helped.
And what about for the rest of us in society? I mean, people are stressed all the time, and you know, people eat on the go. You know, people eating in their car, or you know, on the metro, even though it's not allowed, or even walking down the street. I mean, it just seems that eating becomes one of those things that we just kind of fit into a larger life. And Scott, is there any correlation between our increasingly busy and stressful lives and obesity and being overweight?
Yeah, most likely. So studies show that a typical office worker is sitting for something like 15 hours a day, and then they're sleeping for much of the rest. We're sitting in the car on the way to work and the way back from work. We're sitting at the desk in front of the computer. At night, we're sitting either working with the kids doing homework or watching TV or whatever it is. And so all of that sedentary time is time that we're really not burning a whole lot of calories. And at the same time, like we've been talking this whole time here, there's a whole lot of calories to go around, and those are the norms in terms of eating lots of calories during the day. And so I think certainly social norms have changed such that we tend to be very busy. We tend to be eating on the run and almost not even processing what we eat, not even processing that we're getting full. And so that probably does contribute.
I don't know how we fix getting Americans to de-stress, but you know, maybe that can be a topic for another show. Interestingly, in doing preparation for this show, I realized that you know, the rest of the world, excuse me, is also experiencing grower rates of obesity among adults and children. And it's not just an American problem. We can't claim ownership, sole ownership of this. And I'm just curious as to whether or not in any of your respective fields you kind of look at best practices from elsewhere to govern sort of what approaches that you bring to your work. Anybody?
Yeah, so we passed an incredible milestone about 8 years ago, and that is there are now more overweight people than underweight people in the world. Which we never thought that we'd get to that point, and it really is a big problem. In general, we're leading the trends toward weight gain and obesity, and so we've been exporting our way of life for quite a while now in terms of the McDonald's going out to lower income countries and the more sedentary type lifestyles and so forth. There are some countries and cities that are much healthier. They're doing some things that are much more productive toward maintaining a healthy weight. For example, in some of the European cities, they're much more amenable to being active, to walking to work, to riding your bike to work. And those are things that we're now talking about doing here, and we're slowly getting in that direction. We've been going in the opposite direction toward more suburban sprawl, where you have to be in a car or public transportation to get around. So that's one example. In terms of food, similar things. There are some countries, some cities that are working at changing school foods and foods that are available in workplaces. And we're hearing now that we're doing this as well here in Arlington and in some places of the U.S., and that's a very good trend.
To follow up on his comment a little bit earlier about we're looking at these European countries, we have a couple safe routes to school grants in Arlington Public Schools, and we're studying some of the countries, Switzerland, that teach bicycle safety in the 3rd grade, and they practice that, and they have actual roads and courses that the kids are trained on so that they're riding along with vehicles, which to us may seem, you know, rather frightening for our parents to think that their kids are going to, be riding a bike in Northern Virginia traffic. But we are, Arlington's very bike friendly. We have a lot of bike trails, and we are teaching our kids, especially at the high school, we have a full bike safety program, but we started to integrate that down into middle school and elementary schools because this is what those European countries are doing. Portland, Oregon is probably one of the leading countries in the United States that's leading that bike safety and education in our country, and we're closely studying some of those Western cities in the States to see, really how you're doing it. And it's a behavior change. It's changing the attitudes of our parents. It's changing the infrastructure in our roadways to make sure that we have the open spaces and available for that bike traffic, and that the parents' comfort levels, that their kids are skilled enough and they feel comfortable that the county and the infrastructure is in place to keep their child safe while they're riding. The other education is we're not comfortable as drivers on how to drive with a bicyclist on the road.
Indeed.
It's something that we teach in our driver's education class. We now have a parent-teen driver's education class.
Oh, bless you.
That we talk to our parents about driving with your new team, but also educating adults on how do you drive with now people in your roadways, which is critical because you take a right-hand turn, you don't look to see there's a bicyclist, and it's an ugly situation. So we use that as another step, but it's also a healthy way of life. It's a greener way of life, which Arlington is a huge component on that. That was a school board member's platform as well as a county board member's platform to really push the bicycle programs in Arlington. It's within building codes. They put it on the metro buses so that we're really trying to facilitate that mode of transportation for a healthier, greener, and also to do anything to decrease the congestion in this area.
Right.
But we are looking at some of those European ways of life and to see if we can bring them here into the States and specifically here into Arlington.
Well, you've probably heard of Jamie Oliver and the
Oh, sure.
changes that he's made and the work that he did in Britain with somebody called the Dinner Lady, who is the person in the cafeterias that he partnered with to start to make the changes they made there, and pairing with farmers and local produce. We hosted at Washington Lee High School the Dinner Lady actually for lunch for a couple of days in January, and we have been swapping back and forth through emails how to buy the local produce, how to partner with farmers, how to get the kids to like the food that we're serving, and how to make eating and taking the time to eat a priority for our principals, our community, so that we give our kids the time to find out where the food comes from, how to prepare it, and then to eat it slowly during the day, taking time for lunch. They actually have an hour in Britain for lunch, and the whole community comes and eats with the kids. So that's been a really interesting program to watch, and hopefully we'll learn some good things to try for this coming up year.
Now, we've had a question sent in. Is this the Farm to School program? Is this part of that?
It was the start to the Farm to School program. It was me trying to get information about just how to go about partnering with people, local farmers, local people who want to help change the way that the school lunch works, and how to sustain it rather than just go out and buy local produce. How do we change the environment? So it was the first part, and we have paired with some local farmers, and we've offered spinach and radishes and lettuce, all different kinds of produce this spring to kids, and we're going to go forward farther in the fall and offer different produce from Shenandoah County, Loudoun County, and then right here in Great Falls.
And what's been the response from the young
Good.
folks?
The kids have been very excited. Yeah, it's been very good. We had a radish day at Ashland Elementary School, and you wouldn't think that kids like radishes, but everybody liked radishes. And we made radish mice, and we made radish confetti, and so kids got to see all kinds of ways to use radish. And actually, they were very surprised. It was an early spring vegetable. It's hard to find something that early, but they were equally excited about spinach and lettuce. So it's been very good. I'm excited for the fall to try more.
No, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like playing with their food?
That's
so
right.
if you can carve up a radish, it's half the battle,
Exactly.
right? We're having this great conversation, about a serious topic, and it's one that's reached all levels of sort of public policy in this country. The First Lady of the United States has made children's obesity her signature initiative, and was just sort of struck by some of the things that she said about what we need to do, and it's mirrored the sorts of solutions that you've all talked about, but they've really honed in on activity, physical activity, and giving people the time and the space and the opportunity to be active and fit. I want to talk about the very real concern that many young people have, particularly ones who are overweight. They may not be particularly good or coordinated at doing various forms of physical activity, and I'm just wondering about all of the stigma associated with being overweight and exercising at gyms and putting on shorts and all of that. I mean, are we preaching to something that's really not addressing some of those core issues that particularly young people are dealing with? A lot of lack of self-confidence, a lot of fear of doing something they're not good at, not looking good while they're doing it.
I'm glad you brought up the topic of stigma, because it's been said that obesity is the last socially acceptable form of prejudice. It's really a terrible thing, because just because people have a few extra pounds on them, people think that they're not as smart, they think that they're lazy, they think that they're unethical. It's a really terrible thing. It's no different than looking at the color of someone's skin. It's no different than looking at someone's gender and making assumptions and so forth. And it's really a terrible thing. And it adds to this problem, because you take people who already are in not such a good place in terms of weight, and then you further decrease their self-esteem and confidence, and that certainly doesn't make things any better. In terms of exercise, you don't have to go to the gym to be active, and you don't have to necessarily play sports, and you don't necessarily have to do anything organized. Just simply changing these social norms so that people are outside instead of inside for part of the day, so that people are moving instead of just behind a desk for part of the day, so that physical education classes are something that happens every day with everybody, even if it doesn't mean putting on the shorts and playing basketball. You don't have to do that, but just to be active every day goes a long, long way.
And eating healthy isn't cool, at least for our kids in school. And so that's a big part of it. A whole class will come through the line, and nobody will take a fruit or a vegetable. And we encourage the kids, and take the fruit, take the orange, and then one brave soul will do it, and all of a sudden other kids will too.
Okay.
And so trying to present the food in different ways, encourage kids, and then find some kids who can be role models is really important. And that's been a surprising finding for me in the lines. It's just, kids are afraid to be the kid to try the new thing, or to eat the fruits and vegetables, or to take the salad for lunch. So I think we're working really hard in encouraging kids to eat the food, to become involved. And I think in the end that will help to make a bigger change. Yeah.
For me personally, I was always really, really big kid. I'm still a big guy, but I was one of those kids who was in the obese statistic when I was young. And doing stuff like eating healthily, that's what square people did. That's listening to your parents who tell you to eat your vegetables. And it just echoes what you're talking about. There's so many, negative reinforcements out there that prevent people from truly embracing this kind of healthy lifestyle. But we certainly see some successes. Childhood obesity was, for a while, the rate of increase was exploding, and it's kind of leveled off, even though adult obesity still seems to be climbing rapidly. But Scott, have we had some successes in dealing with childhood obesity that slowed this rate of growth?
I'm really hopeful, because I've seen some good changes over the past few years. Just a small handful of years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, for one, people weren't really talking about obesity in the positive way that they are now. It was looking down on people rather than saying, this is really a societal level problem and we need to do something about it. So that's changed a little bit. And now that Michelle Obama has gotten involved, I think she's done some wonderful things, and I think that she still needs to go farther, and she will. And she's talking now more about food in addition to physical activity. And I think she's starting to talk a little bit more about environmental and societal changes in addition to just getting people more active and getting them more motivated. So that's good. And so I do think that we're slowly making some changes, certainly in terms of awareness, a little bit in terms of environment. And so that is going to pay dividends. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about. I don't really know how quite to phrase this, but I'll go ahead and try. So we have some interesting economic studies which have looked at kind of how obesity impacts people's lives in ways other than health and some of the other things that we've talked about. And a study by a professor at Cornell looked at wage earnings by obese folks and had some pretty surprising findings that I don't know what to make of, so hopefully we can do it together. But it found that significantly obese white women suffered significant wage penalties as a result of their obesity. Found that among white men there really wasn't much of a wage penalty that came with levels of obesity. Found that with black men actually, higher weight was associated with higher wages. And for black women and for Latinos of either gender, found some similar findings to what was found with white women. So that's a lot of stuff, but the basic takeaway was that for at least one group, higher weight was associated with higher wages and incomes, and I think I have an idea about that. But seeing some gender bias in addition to some of the other nefarious things that we've talked about. Just any thoughts on that? I found it fascinating.
I think this gets right back to the situation of weight bias and obesity bias. You see this all the time. People who are overweight, we somehow think that they're not as intelligent, that they're lazier, that they're not going to be as good workers, and it's bunk. It makes no sense. And I take it very personally because I work with overweight and obese folks every single day. I love these people. I spend time with these people, and they're wonderful, and they're every bit as smart, if not smarter, as people who are thin, and they're every bit as interesting, if not more interesting, as people who are thin. There's no difference other than the fact that genetically they tend to put on weight a little bit easier, and the things that they've grown up in have given them some habits that tend to that they gain weight a little bit more. But it gets back to this prejudice and stigma against people who are overweight, and it's every bit as bad as prejudice against gender. It's every bit as bad as prejudice against color. It's every bit as bad as any other prejudice in our society, and we've moved past many of those for the most part, or somewhat, and we're still not really getting there in terms of this. And I'm really hopeful that we're going to move in that direction because it is very much heartbreaking.
And do you find among young people, you all being exposed to the young psyche and seeing kind of how they think, do you see that there's any difference in the role models that they have in terms of idealizing looks or intellect? Do you find that they don't discriminate really among overweight people? Or do you see some of these issues even among the young people, preferring the thin?
Well, I think that the girls, at least in the cafeteria lines, right away, early on, as early as second grade, you see that girls are much more conscientious about what they're choosing and much more concerned about their weight and what they're eating.
Okay.
Yeah, and where the boys are much more lackadaisical, but girls are very conscientious. And in elementary, more girls choose fruits and vegetables than boys, which is an indicator, obviously, that they are concerned about their weight, and they also pay more attention to what other girls are eating.
I think with the females, even at any age, it's a self-esteem, it's a self-image, and it plays back to what you were saying. It's unfortunate that these prejudices will weigh upon sometimes your motivation to even try to make the healthier choices or to do more healthier activities and behaviors, that they sometimes might even lack that motivation to try. But again, it has a lot to do with the self-image that, especially with girls see. And, we were talking about this earlier before the show started, that it may be there with boys. We're just not seeing those behaviors and those traits as frequently as we are and overtly as we are with the girls. But for our overweight boys, I can't imagine that those same behaviors and the feelings are just the same, but they're just not as visible.
Well, that certainly leads to, at one time we were very concerned in this country about the proliferation of eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, and now we add to that, people who have found surgical solutions in various, gastric bypass surgery, for example, extreme attempts, both encouraged and not, to lose weight. And I'm just curious as to your thoughts and perspectives on any of that, eating disorders, and Scott, maybe in your case, the radical surgeries that people are resorting to. Working with young people, do you think we've the eating disorder rise has abated, or I don't hear as much about it as I did maybe 5, 10 years ago.
We don't hear a lot about it. We suspect, we've taken surveys pretty regularly in Arlington, and we do have a percentage of girls who say they're on a diet, not to the extreme of the bulimia or the anorexia that we know of. We're certainly careful, and we're watching our students, both males and females. We don't hear about it as much with the males, but we are, keeping an eye on it. But I think it's the eating disorder in the other extreme. But again, we're trying to give them the healthy behaviors, the healthy habits to make wise decisions. And if we have concerns with children, we certainly start talking to their parents as early as we can.
And how do those conversations usually go, out of curiosity?
We give those to the counselors
Okay.
and the school nurses who are a little bit more skilled and maybe have a better rapport. We always tell our teachers make those positive contacts early, but when we really have suspect of that, we try to bring in some health professionals to help back up our findings and help, because it's not just a one, like we were saying, it's not just one individual approach, it's more of a societal issue, and really working. The family may have issues that we're not aware of as teachers, and counselors may know about it, and of course you want to bring in your healthcare professionals and your nurses and our school physician to work with the family, because it goes much deeper than just that physical not eating. There's psychological issues that we want to find out the best approach to work with that child, and and explaining it to the parents, because they're sometimes not even aware of it.
So what about the radical surgeries that exist out there? I mean, it seems that for some people they cause a great deal of help and assistance in taking weight off and keeping it off, but you hear horror stories as well.
Sure. So the big picture is this. Obesity is a big problem, and if we could solve it on our own just by working really hard, we wouldn't have 200 million people who are overweight in our society. So what we need to do is have a number of tools that are helpful in addressing this, okay? Surgery is potentially one of those helpful tools, but it's just a tool. It's unlike other surgeries. So for example, if you have a heart surgery or a gallbladder surgery or something like that, the surgeon goes in, he fixes the problem, cuts it out or sews it up, and then closes up, and then it's done, and the problem is generally fixed. It's not that way with this surgery. This surgery can be a tool to help people have a little bit lower appetite, to help people become full a little bit quicker, and they tend to lose some weight. But in and of itself, if that's all you do, ultimately people will gain the weight back. So that needs to be combined with other tools. Those other tools might be education, those tools might be support groups, those tools might be skill building groups, those tools might be medications that can be helpful with this. Those tools certainly should include societal level changes. I'm a broken record on this, of course, but societal level changes and sort of engineering our environments to make our homes a little healthier and so forth. But it can be a helpful tool. Unfortunately, like you say, I see person after person after person who's had the surgery, but their surgeon treated it like any other surgery, and he just sent them off, and they ultimately ended up in the same place that they were, or potentially even worse. So possibly useful tool, but needs to be done in a really responsible way.
So not a quick fix, which is often at odds with our American desire to sort of identify problems and take care of them quickly. But really, what you all have talked about tonight, whether it be changing your lifestyle, your approach, getting more physical education, taking more time to know about what you're putting into your body and savoring the time to eat it, these are things that all have a common theme. They take time. Are we really going to be able to get Americans who seem to treat time as that most precious commodity to really take the time to do all of these changes?
I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I would like to think we're hopeful. We have an initiative with our school nurses about having 5 a week, which is eating 5 meals with the family a week. No screen time, no distractions, that you actually sit down with your family, you have conversations, you slow down your eating so you're not distracted by something else that causes you not to focus on, I'm really eating, I'm not sure if I'm full yet, but I'm just going to keep putting it in my mouth. But having conversations with the family, bringing back those values that are kind of lost in a really busy, hectic, fast-paced lifestyle, because time is of the essence. And trying to encourage our families to eat 5 meals. We're not saying dinners, it could be breakfast, it could be a snack at the end of a day, but eat 5 meals together to try to bring back those social norms. It's one of the initiatives that Arlington has a partnership, which is a greater group than just schools. It's faith-based, it's community, to really try to hone in on bringing the family back. And this is one of the ways to incorporate some of those social values, encourage healthy eating, slow down the busyness of our lifestyles, and really try to, get back some of the home family, values that we're so missing with our kids.
And really, Amy, I mean, the schools, not to put so much weight and responsibility on you, but, students are spending more time within, the school system structure than they are really in any other place. So it's really a primary tool, primary laboratory to really accomplish a lot of these goals, right?
It is, and we really want to focus on the education component of the menus and of what we're offering, as well as just making the healthy choices. And we have on our menus a wellness tip every month, and it can be something like sleep 9 hours every night. Take a walk after school for 30 minutes to incorporate your exercise, those kinds of things. So we hope that if we start with education and making eating good food cool, and supporting that with our students, that will make a difference for their lifestyles and for the time, not just that they're at school, but when they go home.
And another thing that I neglected to ask you earlier, are school lunches any better tasting than they
are
were when I remember?
They are much better tasting.
Okay.
We work really hard to search the best foods that we can find for our dollars, and we've spent a lot of time changing over the past few years our specs to get the best products that we can. And our Chefs to School program with Mrs. Obama, we are working on trying to use the food that we can buy in better, more appealing ways. So I think that school lunch has improved a lot. There's been a lot of good changes. I think you'd be happy.
Well, that's good, because I will say, back to that whole people make rational decisions. My high school just, we had food made in a central facility elsewhere. It was brought into the school. It was
plastic wrap,
unidentifiable as food by the time you got it. So the rational choice was to take, as little time as you could to go off-site to a fast food place and consume calories really quickly, lest you eat an unappetizing lunch. So it's good to see that Arlington has the approach that maybe we should make this stuff taste good too.
Yeah, and we did have a central kitchen. We still do have a central kitchen, but we are moving in a different direction. We're upgrading our elementary school kitchens to cooking kitchens, and hopefully asking kids to take a second chance, because we're making a lot of changes each year, and I think that you'd be surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So with busy Americans, Scott, can we do all this?
We absolutely can.
Okay.
And we actually have a model for what we want to do in terms of obesity, and that's in terms of what happened with tobacco. So we knew as far back as 1947 that tobacco was unhealthy, it was going to cause heart disease, lung disease, etc. And we told them in school, Surgeon General reports told them, we educated people, and people just kept smoking more and more and more and more and more. It was once we coupled that education with environmental and societal changes that we made huge leaps forward. So we banned advertising on TV for tobacco, and shortly thereafter in print. We increased the taxes on cigarettes, which made it a little bit less consumption initially, but ultimately made it much harder for kids to start smoking, which is the most important way to prevent, right? Ultimately, there were laws against smoking indoors in some places and in workplaces and so forth. And so we've seen an incredible improvement in smoking rates from about 55% of Americans in 1960 to about 22% today. And in some cities like New York City, where they're even more aggressive, it's down to 15.1% today, which nobody ever would have thought of that a couple decades ago. And so that's where we're heading in terms of obesity. And there's no question, we're a wonderful society of very intelligent and hardworking people. We don't have a lot of time, but we're going to get there. We just need to do it in a smart, systematic way.
Okay. Well, we have just a few minutes remaining, so in the closing time, why don't you tell folks watching at home who may be struggling how to figure out how to incorporate these changes into their lifestyle, or how to advise people close to them, what are the top things that they should do and not do to deal with obesity, and really what are the top things that policymakers or institutions should do? What are the primary areas that are going to do the most good? And we'll start with you, Scott, and then go down the line.
Yeah, first of all, having realistic expectations is essential, okay? You don't need to lose 50 pounds or 100 pounds to be healthy. You don't need to look like Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt to be healthy or to be attractive, okay? We have very good studies that show 5% or 7% of body weight loss, which might only be 10 or 15 pounds, can significantly reduce the rates of diabetes and hypertension and all the other obesity-related disorders. So set your sights at a reasonable level and try to do small things throughout your day to get there. A little bit of walking, a little bit of healthy eating, a little bit of smart choices go a long, long way. I think more than anything, that's the most important thing that you can do.
Okay, so even if you are 100 pounds overweight, don't view it as that big of a mountain to climb.
Absolutely.
10 at a time. Okay, Amy.
For us in the schools, I think this year we're going to have a Meatless Monday. And a big part of that is to spend time on Monday thinking about what you're eating. And hopefully it'll set the stage for the whole week. So start to make conscientious choices about healthy eating. And that's our focus for this year, and I think that that's what we can do best in schools, to really make people stop, think, and pay attention.
Stop and, oh, wow. I'm going to absorb that lesson at home because my wife and I are primary guilty people of deciding what to eat for dinner at 6:15.
I think what was said earlier is just making your physical activity reasonable, you know, not trying to go out and do 30 minutes your first time out when you're physically active or your fitness is just take it in small increments and then just build on that and set personal small goals for yourself and reassess those when you've maximized that ability to do the 30-minute walk without much effort, then increase it to 40 minutes and just set small realistic goals. And you know, just also thinking, as we do in the schools, of physical education is different from physical activity. We want to educate the kids about really what is healthy in terms of physical activity and physical, you know, weight loss, and you know, and how do you do that safely. You just don't want kids out there. I was just talking to a colleague of mine who went running in the heat of the day and really didn't hydrate well. We want to give them the proper tools and the education to do this safely. So we don't want people going out there and just being extreme right away, but just make it in small increments that are realistic.
And Debbie, we don't allow students to opt out of physical education?
We do not.
Okay, good. You know,
We do
remember
not.
that.
And you cannot substitute, you know, the interscholastic programs for PE either, because that's physical activity and we physically educate.
Okay. Well, this has been an eye-opening conversation for me. Thank you very much, Scott Kahan, Amy McCluskey, and Debbie DeFranco.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. You know, there is so much that can be done that people can take personal responsibility for if they are carrying a few extra pounds and they want to do something about it. There are a lot of resources that are available to help you lead the healthy lifestyle that you need to lead. I'm not just talking from the standpoint of someone who read a website. For those of you who have followed me and know me, you know that at one point in my life I was about 90 pounds heavier than I am today. So it certainly can be done. And I thank you all for joining us by watching VoiceBox tonight. Again, I'd like to thank our three guests for a fascinating conversation and our studio audience for questions. We hope you join us next month when we'll tackle another issue important to the Arlington community and to our national community on VoiceBox. Good night.